All right, we're back. Welcome everyone to episode 8, consistency. We're here on Juneteenth, June 19th. Of course, that's a special day for African Americans. You know, the day they say that we were, or the last states had officially gotten free. I have seen some discrepancies about that, but we won't ruin the holiday spirit, man. How you doing today?
I'm doing great. And, we're not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about that, but I definitely encourage our young people, elementary school, middle school, even high school, to look into it because what you don't take the time to find out about, people can just repeat it on you. And you don't want that. And there I talked about this on a previous episode. There are people teaching in universities that chattel enslavement didn't even happen here in the United States.
Mm.
So, that's dangerous that people with PhDs would teach something like that. And so this shouldn't just be a day where people get off from work and sleep in and go eat out and go to concerts. It really should be a day when people understand that your great, great, great grandparents were forced to build this country for free. So I'm gonna hit the pause because I can go
No.
on that topic.
Yeah, one thing I do want to say about that yet is this is somewhat of a new holiday. I forgot when it probably got established. I don't even know to
I think
pinpoint.
I think it officially became a holiday at the beginning of the Biden administration.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm not mistaken.
So yeah, I felt like as a holiday, I do think it has some ways to go just in terms of the information that's going to be shared, topics that are going to be discussed today. Uh, I know Kendrick Lamar is having a concert, for I don't think it's necessarily for Juneteenth. I know his birthday had recently passed, so he's having a concert in LA, kind of doing the Not Like Us stuff and all of that. So, but I think that there's, I'm not gonna hate on the holiday because I think it does have potential to, inform people in the future. But I think, yeah, I just don't think it's all the way there yet. Of course, it's not as established and as well known as like the 4th of July or other, Independence Day stuff like that. But I think it's a start. So, I won't look at the at the negatives or anything either. I'm gonna be optimistic about it moving forward and
There
just
you
try to
go.
use this day to, our advantage in the future. So
There you go.
yeah, that's our Juneteenth. Wouldn't be right to just completely skip it on today, but we have other things to talk about. Frank, you want to lead us off?
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, and I don't know how this didn't come up before, I believe that June is Black Music Month,
Oh, really?
if I'm not mistaken.
I didn't know that.
And oh my goodness, this is if we stick to our normal schedule, this would be our last time doing this in the month of June. I mean, it's
Yep, that is right. It is for the people who didn't know, like me.
yeah, it is this month, right? Yeah, I was just trying to double check because there's so many different observations but of course, as music aficionados, we we definitely want to acknowledge, you know, Black Music Month,
Mhm.
and there's so many people who have done it big, from Cab Calloway to Duke Ellington, Marvin Gaye, Billie Holiday,
Mhm.
Diana Ross, Dougie Fresh. There's just so many people that need to be acknowledged. And so for some people they would say, well, what's the big deal about acknowledging artists? And in the United States, some would say that our problem is that we worship entertainers.
Mhm.
And there may be some truth to that. However, for me, I look at the positive, to the point that you were making about looking at Juneteenth. I look at the positive contribution of musicians. And when you think of, it takes a nation. Um, I forget the total title of that Public Enemy
Mhm.
CD, but there are musicians who've actually absolutely pushed the culture forward. And it's very easy to criticize artists, and we've been critical. I've been critical of certain artists who we feel have set us back. But then
Mhm.
there are those artists who have helped to push us forward. Poor Righteous Teachers, Nina Simone. We can go, we can go on and on with those artists who helped to push the culture forward at their own risk. Because some people feel like, take somebody like Bob Marley, and there was a
Mhm.
movie that recently came out about him. Mixed opinions about the movie.
Mhm.
What I will say is that there's a biography that came out about 12 years ago that's really good. But some would say that Bob Marley didn't just die. Bob Marley was killed. That's what some people would say, allegedly. Some
Mhm.
people would say that because of how revolutionary his music was. And he's not the only one. So for me, that's when I think about people like Bob, Nestor Marley, and those people who push the culture forward. That's why it's important to acknowledge Black History Month. And of course, as somebody that really appreciates gospel music, Richard Smallwood and Kirk Franklin and Harriet Jackson. In fact, I need to say this. I'm not sure. First, I'm not sure if there's been a more impactful gospel artist since Mahalia Jackson. And that's no slight to any of the artists who are in the game right now. When Mahalia Jackson was in her heyday, she there was a point where she was the top grossing artist in the country, in the world, period. In fact, she was so successful that the secular industry constantly tried to get her to switch over, but she refused to switch over. And so when you talk about impact, there's not that many entertainers that have had more impact than Mahalia Jackson. So anyway, I just had to I just had to put that plug in there for Black Music Month.
Mhm.
And there's some people who would have us to believe that other folks created all of the music. But just because the complexion of jazz music has changed a lot today, let's not forget that Black people started jazz. Let's not even try to get it twisted. Just because some of you have gone to a jazz concert and the complexion of the artist and the audience has been white for a minute.
Yeah.
That's been sort of consistent, but the artists have changed over time. And I'm not saying that it's bad that white artists are appreciated the music form. I'm just saying that we want to make sure on this Juneteenth that we remember who started it. That's all. This is Black History, Music History Month. So, all right.
Yeah, shout out to Black music. That's a main focus of this this channel. So, always want to highlight that. I didn't even know. So, thank you for informing me, because it's not anything that's promoted. Well, I guess it's one of the lesser known months. Everyone else has a month. So
Yes, sir. So kind of piggybacking off of our last conversation, and really, Dre, you can rightfully take the lead on this, because you were the one that said, I think that a good segue from our last conversation is to take another step and really take a look at, what does it mean to forgive? And, I saw something, and we can go ahead and kind of jump into this a little bit. Forgive. Yeah. So we talked about forgiveness and taking another step and looking at what does it actually mean to apologize, which is the more accurate segue that you had referenced. I don't know if you heard, but Howard University, they asked, well, they didn't ask, they rescinded Diddy's honorary degree.
Mm-hmm.
They gave him back the $1 million that he gave the school, and they canceled the scholarship that was going forth in his name. Now, other people have experienced similar types of treatment. Dr. Bill Cosby experienced a similar kind of fate with, I believe, the same university.
Did he actually graduate from Temple, or was that
if I'm not mistaken, he graduated from Temple.
Okay.
But Dr. Cosby was known to be a huge contributor to HBCUs.
Okay.
And there's a number of them that he, it was nothing for him to drop. He and his wife, Camille, would drop $1 million on this one and $1 million on that one. And once he came under fire, a number of institutions began rescinding honorary degrees and taking names off buildings and all of that stuff. Now, what was interesting is, in the case of Dr. Cosby, if I remember correctly, unless something different happened on the back end, originally buildings were scrubbed of folks' names and honorary degrees were rescinded. But initially, I didn't hear anything about money being returned. So it may have ended up getting returned, but in the beginning, I didn't hear anything about money being returned. So in this case with Diddy, I understand that they're going to give him back his $1 million. So I know that Diddy had took to social media to offer an apology,
Mhm.
and there were people who were critical of that apology. So I know that you had done a little research on what is considered an authentic apology. Maybe that would be a good thing to share now with our audience, and then we can talk about this.
Okay. Yeah, let me bring up some of my notes. So I was just watching a couple of different YouTube videos, just doing a little bit of research on what an apology is. And so some of the things I came up or had found was an apology is an evidence of debt. So it's like if I've harmed you and I have not acknowledged it, then that means the debt is in dispute. And what an apology is kind of like an explicit description of what I did wrong. And so if it occurs again, then that means that it's a bigger offense. So I think when a lot of people do talk about apologies, people are quick to say they're sorry for something, but I don't think it's always a full acknowledgement of their wrongdoings at times. And I do, but I think that I think uh, an apology should be better defined within a culture, so we kind of know what steps to take towards redemption. And is an apology enough? I'm not sure. In some cases, maybe not. But I think that also I think that's what a lot of people are looking for before um, they're able to forgive. So a lot of times we ask someone if they're ready to forgive someone and they've never truly received an apology. So coming from that standpoint, it's like I think forgiveness is something that you can have within yourself. Like you can forgive somebody, but I don't think that that person, you can forgive somebody internally, but I don't think that other person is truly forgiven until there's been a formal apology and an acknowledgement of that wrongdoing. Because I can say, yeah, I forgive you for doing me wrong, but if that person has never acknowledged that they did me wrong or that they felt like they did me wrong, then it's the me as myself, I can feel at peace with the situation, but I think that the apology is more for the person who has done the offense. And I think that that's kind of something that's left un un still it's still open on the offender side if they never formally apologize or seek to right their wrongs in that sense.
You raise a really good point, and you got me thinking about a couple of situations that I'm dealing with right now. Because let's face it, you know, we live we live in a society where things are constantly moving and fluid. And if your work brings you in contact with people, with a lot of people, chances are high that you will have the opportunity to be offended. And here's a question that I have for you as it pertains to this. And that definition that you gave will probably bear repeating, because one of the things that I found is a deterrent for people actually apologizing is them understanding that there was any wrong done.
Mhm.
Because a lot of times people feel like, especially today, where less and less I feel like there's a shared moral compass.
Mhm.
And I think you were the one that kind of addressed this in a previous session. One of the things, when you think about special days, and one of those special days that we've began to do a good job with maybe is the King holiday. One of the things that was admirable about that time, not that I was there, but from looking at it from a historian standpoint, people would come together and often they would use the principles eschewed by people like Reverend Abernathy, Dr. King, Hosea Williams, beliefs that they got from a similar book that they were all reading, namely the Bible, and they allowed that to create a framework for their understanding of right and wrong.
Mhm.
The challenge that I think we have today is that there's less of a standard. And
Mhm.
so this person over here has a set of beliefs and values. This person over here has a set of beliefs and values. And so often I'm finding people don't have a clue that they've offended another person because the lessons that may have been taught in the household a few generations ago is not being taught in the household. It's not touched on in school. People don't go to church. So where do we even learn that? For an example, this is a simple one. You and I both would agree on this one, but you'd be surprised that people don't even get this. Person walks into your house and they find a 20 on the ground. Nowadays, nowadays people feel like, well, it's on the ground. If this 20 meant something to if this 20 meant something to Dre, surely it wouldn't be on the ground.
Mhm.
Now I think you and I would agree that we understand that if that 20 is on the ground in your house, that's your 20. But now, because there's like not a common understanding of what is stealing and what is one person's property versus another, a person may take that 20 and not understand that there's an apology necessary because they don't even realize that that was theft.
Mm. Yeah. That's a very good point. Just in terms of people not having the same standards and same value system. Um, and I think actually that's kind of where music right now is one of the connecting factors, which isn't necessarily the best thing, but it's one of the last things that we have left that, you can kind of get some commonality in terms of cultural togetherness. So I think, but when you listen to the messages that we're getting from a lot of this music, which is mainly by misguided youth for the most part, so that's one of the issues that we're facing with rap or any type of music being the more helping us develop a moral compass. But if you just think about how things are developing, even when it comes to relationships. If you think about what a girlfriend is, what a wife is in today's standards. So it's like so many people are talking um, about just. I think I was thinking about this the other day, like, since people aren't necessarily, well, from my observation, the rate of people getting married and things like that has kind of dropped. And a lot of people do um, kind of treat their girlfriend boyfriend situation as as a marriage to some, or a lot of people will get into be a boyfriend girlfriend and then try and apply the same rules as a husband or wife, which it should be in the direction of, but I think once you get into that though, then you start having different debates about respect and what's acceptable when in different settings, and some be like, oh well, that's just your girlfriend, that's not your wife, or that's, and then there's becomes different lines that can be crossed and things of that nature. So I think without a framework for people to really, and people moving so far away from the church at this current moment, um, those small relationships are now vulnerable to different levels of disrespect, and it's kind of hard to have repercussions on some of that as well when things aren't established in the first place.
You raise a really good point about not operating from a standpoint of cultural understanding. I remember when it became popular for people uh, to wear their pants on the ground, and some people still do. And what was amazing to me when I learned from those who taught us where that came from the prison culture, because in the prisons the dudes didn't have any belts, so they didn't have a choice but to hold their pants up, because for obvious reasons in prison they're not given the opportunity to wear belts, because they it can be used as weapons and so forth.
Mhm.
Even now, with the fascination with the very long eyelashes, and so for some women, they don't understand that in the drag culture they would wear the really long eyelashes. Well, first of all, in that culture, most things are heavily exaggerated. We understand that.
Mhm.
And the really long eyelashes was a very important part of that culture, because these were men pretending to be women. And so much of what now has become common in the thought culture, back when I was growing up, we understood that this is how prostitutes dress. And so it's it's amazing that, again, we've gone so far left or right, however you want to call it, as far as understanding where different habits, traditions, cultures emanate from. People just pick things up and they don't understand where it came from. And it's sad, because part of the reason why a street worker would show all of her body is because she's a street worker. She's trying to show, hey, what I'm showing you, I'm willing to share this with you right now.
Mhm.
And so now a guy, he's got this woman who is really, a good girl, maybe, and he's trying to help her understand that, hey, look, I know in your mind you feel like this is just a form of independence for you, and you feel that this is being sexy, but you could there's a way to be sexy without looking like a thought.
Mhm. That was actually something I was having a conversation about earlier this was it earlier this week? Maybe end of last week. But it was about just the concept of arranged marriages in the Black community, which I don't think has ever been um, widely practiced, if it has been practiced at all. But
Not here in the United States.
mhm,
Now, of course, in Africa, yes,
right.
absolutely.
Yeah, but I was just thinking of that concept, not necessarily all across the board, but I'm just looking at the current state of black families in general, and just kind of if there was like some type of, because I do feel like there needs to be a new standard introduced to our culture. Just even if it's just to supply a standard moving forward of what a successful marriage should look like. I mean, there are, of course, many examples of successful marriages in the Black community, but I think I read some statistics that right now where the divorce rate for amongst Black couples is like 30%, which is the highest. I want to say maybe like 18% for Hispanics, and it gets a little lower. I don't have the where I read that at off the top of my head, but it got me thinking just in terms of how much marriage is more of a tool, especially in America, um, just in terms of how you get ahead in the system. Because and plus it also it's a big financial, it's a business as well. So it's like if we're in the future, if we're trying to kind of help the Black race survive, it's like, yeah, sometimes maybe these families will have to marry their kids in order to join the wealth, and not necessarily like, and also knowing that they're coming from a family who's taught their child how to treat someone in a relationship, and that's something that kind of needs to go both ways, I think. And now it was just a random thought. Of course, I'm sure there's other issues that go into it, but yeah, I think something does need to kind of be revamped in terms of Black relationships and kind of how we prepare our youth for taking that step. Because just as I'm out here and seeing my friends and other people, a lot of people don't know what the next step is, even if they came from two-parent households. And because you're not really necessarily running into other people who are have came from a two-parent household and know what that structure looks like and how to kind of move forward. And so everyone's learning about sex and relationships from social media and music now. And so that's kind of messing up the initial fabrics that make up a strong family, I think.
I probably say this on every one of these, and I'm so passionate about this, and I'm so godly proud of you for standing up as a representative of your generation to say, okay, and I addressed this before, because there's some people who they have an opinion, but they're not willing to put their opinion on the line to shift the culture. And when you offered your bold critique of the hip hop culture months ago, I thought that you were definitely one of those people poised to be a leader for these times. As a financial coach, I can tell you fundamentally when you think about expanding a culture, expanding and growing as a race, one of the pillars, one of the fundamental key institutions is marriage. When you look at just about every billionaire, they're married. Just about every millionaire, married. Dr. King got killed. Dr. King got murdered when he decided to shift his focus to economic empowerment for his people. That is what got Dr. King killed. And it's very difficult to be economically empowered when you're stratified. Now, how does hip hop play into this? Well, hip hop is one of the leading cultural forces, not just in the United States, but in the world. Now, while it's consumed by people from all over the world, it seems to me, in terms of its impact in the messaging, because it's very common for people to look to people who look like them as models for success. So you dress these rappers up because very few of them are making the kind of money that their videos suggest.
Right.
Very few of them are actually making that money, right? And this is a fact. This isn't because I have mentors who have loaned out vehicles and houses to rappers as props in their video. So as a young Black person, you're looking at this image and deciding that you want to be that. And what this person is saying becomes the gospel to you, because who wouldn't want to have the wealth that you believe that this person has? And this person seems to be suggesting that if you do what they're saying, then you too can be successful as they are. Now, one of the challenges that I have, and this is one of the main reasons why I agreed to be a part of this with you. Some of these artists are promoting something that if you follow them to their house, it's just entertainment. And I almost made me say a curse word, and I don't want to do that. But it's just pure entertainment. And so and now it's not just teenagers. Now we got middle-aged folks believing, again, because there's no true moral compass, middle-aged people taking these messages to heart and living by them. And meanwhile, these people, if you follow them to their house, they're not even on that. Some of them that's in their music telling you that you should have a 30 person a month body count. They're not doing that. They're booed up, they're married.
Yeah.
But you doing that, you destroying yourself. So how could you possibly marry anybody? You see? So that's ultimately the point that I think you're making because the culture makes it very uncomfortable to be married,
Mhm.
or it makes it very uncomfortable for a person to do the things necessary to be attractive to someone within the scope of marriage.
Right. Mhm. That also goes back to I think when we were first talking about the Drake and Kendrick beef, I was mentioning like, the direction that Drake is living just as a, as a superstar, top superstar, who hasn't necessarily settled down yet. And just so he's like one of the people looked at as in terms of the pinnacles of success. And I think I had the comparison to like Jay-Z, like when Jay-Z was at the top, and that's when he had married Beyonce. And then they kind of took that narrative and, moved. I think that was kind of a better look. I think that's still probably one of the strongest images of Mary, although they've had their relationship problems, public and problem, of course, probably in private. Um, but I still think that it's very getting married is not the cool thing to do in hip hop at all. Even the artists who are married, they don't necessarily talk about that. Actually, remember, I don't know if you were paying attention when Chance the Rapper, he had got married a
Didn't
couple of
even
years
know.
ago. Yeah, he had made a whole album about it, and people really just did not like that album at all. It was like they gave it some of the worst reviews ever. But I don't want to say that it's simply because of marriage. I think Chance the Rapper, he was kind of, I think people felt like he kind of did a bait and switch on them with his first couple of projects. Uh, his first mixtape was called the 10-Day Project, where he was like suspended from school for 10 days and just went and made a mixtape. Then the next project was called Acid Rap. And so I think, and that's the one that really got him his popularity. So it's in line with black people, or really just hip hop champions. People who kind of bend the rules to an extent. I think that's always a theme in hip hop. So I just once he had actually, because they used to count how many times he mentioned his wife in the in the album. It just was not received very well. And I think recently he did, or they filed for divorce. I'm not exactly sure what the reasons were, but yeah, it just was never the
The culture put a
cool.
lot of pressure on them, I'm sure.
Yeah. So and yeah, I think that's something that isn't really talked about in our community, just because I see other communities. Actually, I'd seen a TikTok. I would have loved to share it, but it was actually a black girl. I believe she was like living in California, and she was saying, she was just listing things that she had noticed living in like a predominantly white area about how they treated marriage and kind of how they are, I guess, in a way coached up in order to marry. So, and she had some some interesting rules like that. I'm assuming that the white girl or the white women around her would follow. So it was just like, if you're going to college and you're pretty, then go for an athlete. If you're smart, then go for a finance or business major. Um, and these are just some rules that I think if you do probably look wide across the in the white culture, they probably do abide by a lot of those. And it's not to say that it's bad. I mean, you might hear some of it and think of maybe think gold digger or something. Well, I mean, that's a term that's not even necessarily used in white culture, to my knowledge. But it just sounds like they're looking at it more for business decisions. So, they're like, don't get pregnant before you're married, but once you're pregnant, then you get pregnant as quick as possible. And what else she was saying? They were like, sons are better than daughters to have. Like, it was shocking. I wouldn't say shocking. It was interesting just to hear that perspective and, kind of that approach. Cause I don't think any Black girls are kind of encouraged to look at marriage that way. But I think that has now started to, but I think that's also another reason music kind of, I think it has women thinking more about what can be provided for by the man, which is something that I think is important for women. Like, you don't want to be with someone who is incapable of providing for you. So I don't really hold that against women for having standards, honestly. So, but I do think that it's something that needs to be talked about. But that's kind of where the concept of like a plan, like, we needing some type of a couple of arranged marriages just to show some, successful things moving forward and kind of help people just know what to look for, maybe proper occupations that can, sustain a family. Because there's just, I just see us lacking so much structure in that avenue, even when it comes to the full blown weddings. Like, I've been to a couple of Black weddings. I've only been to one white wedding, but that white wedding was extravagant. Like, they really had, like, I would say, I don't even want to give it a ballpark number, but you can tell that it was paid for, and in return, I think they received some really good gifts as well. So, just culturally speaking, I feel like we don't really, we're not fully using the tool of marriage in America, and I think that's another reason why we continue to struggle and we're continuing to fall behind, because money is lost when we're not pooling it together. So, if we're constantly just in these situationships and, having babies out of the wedlock, then there's a lot of opportunity lost there. We're spending a lot of unnecessary money, whether we're operating in two households and things like that nature. So, I think all of those, as we're trying to get to a stable point, we're going to notice that a lot of these little things that we continue to do are really hurting us in the long run.
So, a couple of things that you said, and normally I always have a pen on me. Anyways, so number one, when you mention hip hop kind of having a history and a trend of going against the grain or rule breaking, I don't know. I don't really have a challenge with that, because on Juneteenth, and when I think about what it took for us to make our way out of chattel enslavement, what it took for us to get out of Jim Crow, what it's going to take to prevent re-enslavement. Now, Bob Nestor Marley would suggest that the re-enslavement happened because he said, protect yourself from mental slavery. So the mental slavery has taken place. But see, the mental slavery precedes the actual re-enslavement. So we're not against that cutting edge in hip hop. My point is, and when I was talking about celebrating Black music history, when you think about Marley Marl and some of the cutting edge raps that started hip hop, those kind of raps has the ability to not only continue to tell a story, it also provides a path, a path out.
Mhm.
Now, I don't want to let this whole idea of arranged marriages go away. And it's amazing that you bring that up because I ended up in 2 conversations about this recently to show you that it's a conversation we need to have. Well, first of all, and um, his name just went out of my head. Dr. Umar
Mhm.
has been talking about. He's been questioning the validity of monogamy for a minute.
Mhm.
We're not going to have that conversation here right now. But what's clear is that the system that we have right now is broke. One of the things that they did in America to push us away from a marriage situation that could actually last and stand the test of time was they couched the idea of entering into marriage within the realm of fantasy.
Mhm.
Hollywood painted this picture around the fantastic. They made marriage about a wedding gown, about Cinderella, about all this stuff that doesn't build institutions, doesn't last. Fantasy is designed to fade. So Black folks have been trained in the fantastic, and so when you're a people without hooks in your history and you're trying to grab onto something, then you're gonna okay, this is what marriage looks like. This is what I do. For better, okay, whatever you tell me, that we're gonna go with that.
Right.
Meanwhile, when you look at the Jewish culture, one of the most successful cultures in the world, well, they've got years and years of tradition driving the institution of marriage and how they approach it.
Mhm.
When you look at the Chinese, when you look at the Indians, not the Native Americans here, I'm talking about Indians from
Right.
India. Because the
That
last
was where I got the concept from. Mhm.
yeah, the last conversation that I had about this was with one of my clients who is an Indian from India, and she is the product of an arranged marriage. And her and her husband, because here's the knock on arranged marriages. And I'm not going to say that there may not be some that aren't loving. You know, some of the arranged ones didn't go well.
Mhm.
But this particular couple, they're loving, they're happy, because I've had the opportunity to communicate with both of them. They treat each other with respect. But Black people have been made to think that arranged marriage in some way has to mean bondage,
Mm.
your loss of freedom. Because I didn't get to choose the person that I fell in love with.
Mhm.
Well, apparently that's not working very well because we've fallen out of love.
honestly, with that too, there's too many options as well with social media. That's, I think, especially when social media came, I think that kind of really, going back to your what you were saying about the fantasy part of it, the way that they have what a marriage should look like on social media, it's completely unobtainable. And I know that from having two parents who are in a successful relationship for, they're gonna kill me for not. They just had their anniversary too. I want to say 35 years.
It's a
Um,
blessing.
yeah, I
Mine,
just to
mine's 54. 54. Yeah.
yeah, it's like some of the way that they have that, or they have people what they want from marriage, it's not really possible. And I think that's why I'm looking at it at the current rate that we're going. I'm like, marriage is just going to continue to decline because people are not going to be able to meet those expectations that are being placed on us, men and women. Like there's a lot of high standards for men when, one, financially, a lot of us as men aren't even at the point to where we haven't been saving up to for marriage, and therefore we're not going to be able to afford these extravagant wedding in most cases that a lot of these women are looking for. And if you're when you see a lot of these marriages kind of, these, so I'll call them social media marriages, it's normally too high. Well, now it's it could be a streamer or a TikToker, but a lot of it was high class athletes, marrying, or you don't really, they definitely don't see too many rappers getting married, but just when you see the extravagant weddings and the big bachelorette and bachelor parties, all of that, like it's just something that it's not very common in our community anymore. And it's just, when you said that fantasy, selling the fantasy and not the actual um the actual real benefits of the marriage, whether it's financial support, emotional support. Like I think those are a lot of the things that we're not even people might not even be asking those on on the first date, but that's the more important aspect than people falling in love. Because I also think that people's concept of love is really thrown off as well, with because people fall in love with somebody's social media presence instead. Like, do you think that that's real love? Like, people be in love after they meet on a dating site, and then they meet them in person and think that they're in love with that person. But truthfully, you don't know anything about this person. You know what they showed you on social media and what they showed you on their first date. And so, now you're talking about, I can't even say people be like, oh yeah, we're talking about marriage now. I don't see things moving that quickly, um, especially here in Atlanta. But yeah, I think another thing that I was thinking of when you were talking about the fantasy was, I was watching, it was a movie. It was with Morris Chestnut was the main guy, and Vivica Fox. I'm trying to think of the name. They had like Two Can Play at That Game, I think.
Okay.
That might have been the movie. But I was like, is this a lot of the things that they were showing in that movie? I was like, man, this is just as detrimental as people say rap music is. Like, some of those romantic comedies and stuff, like, and she was just talking, it was like how to get your man back in 10 days, something something to along those lines. And it's just like, I could see the need for it to an extent for women who are dealing with a breakup and kind of need some type of guidance, but at the same time I was like, this isn't the greatest advice for some people. Just a lot of it was a lot of just tick for tat, and feel like when you were saying that, they have this fantasy that's like, where are we learning these things from? And it's from just all media. I won't even just say rap and movies, but just what the media has been feeding us of what it takes to be in a successful relationship and what it takes to have a successful marriage. I think that's where we don't have anything, and we have no place to look. There's no books. We really don't learn that from our I think most people don't learn that from their parents. And I think the other place people were supposed to learn about that would be church, but so many people don't attend that anymore. And even then, I don't think that the church truly prepares a lot of people for a lot of when it comes to just relationships in general, because I think one big thing is churches don't teach you how to be in a relationship, or how to even engage into starting a relationship.
That's
And
right.
I think that's a very big reason why a lot of people don't have stopped going as well. Like, it's another thing deterring them.
You said a mouthful, and one of the things that I found, which is purposeful, and I just kind of, as you were talking, started to make the connection, because one of the things you taught me is that right now the female rapper is king. And it just hit me. I said, that helps to explain it, because what I'm finding is that more than ever before, the women relationally are more confused than ever before. There was a time where the women were more grounded in terms of what a good relationship and what the pieces to a good relationship were. And now the tables have turned, and you find that if you got a guy and a young lady in front of you, and you're having a conversation with them, chances are that he's saying more of the right things than her. The tables have turned, because, I mean, it's scientific fact that the male brain matures later than the female brain. This is just a scientific fact.
Mm-hmm.
And so when it comes to risk taking and sowing of wild oats, we had always found that was the male, and the female would be more grounded. But I'm finding that not to be true anymore, which makes it that much more challenging, because the male brain has not started growing anymore faster. So yeah. So I'm like I said, part of the reason why we do this, meaning you and I, if nothing else, we want to provoke conversation, get people to talking about this, because we're in trouble. We've got to turn this around, because what we're doing right now is not working. It's not sustainable. We can't continue like this. We can't continue with the divorce rate being as high as it is. And we need the culture to shift. People like the Honorable Louis Farrakhan, he's been trying to help shift the culture and do his part. But we need so many more to chip in and help shift the culture. And quite honestly, whereas he's been really strong in terms of addressing these issues, a lot of the people who have a similar platform to him in Christendom haven't done their job. So the people who have the same kind of platform as the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan as a Muslim. Many of the people in Christendom with a similar platform, they're not doing their job.
Real quick, another thing that I had just on my mind earlier was the concept of a lot of people. You hear something?
That's
You got it. Okay. Um, Something that I was thinking of in terms of just Black people in general. I think that we have the idea of freedom misconstrued. I think a lot of people think freedom is the ability to kind of just do whatever you want. But I think when you do whatever you want, which I think is also a theme in hip hop, is I think that leads you to be a slave to your vices as well. And so what we're having now is so many people thinking that they have the freedom to just, be with whoever, but then now you're stuck in a cycle of being with whoever and not ever grounding yourself. So I had that. I wrote some things down, and so let me see if I can find those notes that I had written down, because I was just thinking, and I think it really, and one reason I think Black people are so rebellious is I think due to slavery. And I've always said I think once we were released from slavery, I think that the general consensus was that we were just supposed to die off in general. Like they didn't necessarily put forth any systems that help integrate us into society properly. And so now we're dealing with the repercussions of so many people being miseducated, but still just being able to survive the system. So like I think there's a lot of people who are just kind of, I would say, culturally brain dead, just out here kind of living. They might be reproducing, but not necessarily contributing to society because they don't feel that they belong in society, or they don't feel like they belong to this society, or they're not proud to be part of this society, and therefore they make decisions that kind of reflect that lack of care. Let me see if I could find that where my notes were, because I was just having a brainstorming session and just writing it down. And I was like, yeah, there's a lot of people who just have that concept of freedom misconstrued. And also, I think when it comes to freedom, let me see. Here's my notes. I was reading a book called or listening to an audio book called The Compound Effect, and it was just talking about how just all the small things can really grow into a lot much bigger things, which was more of the basis of like when I was thinking about just marriage or all the little things that I think Black people are kind of doing wrong at this point. Like a whole bunch of mistakes just leads to detrimental results in the long run. And so I think we continue to just like, okay, yeah, well, myself included, we're just doing one small bad thing here, or just not saving this, spending that extra dollar here, and all of that is compound effects because we're building habits off of this, and it just continues to compound until we're in a really, really bad situation, or we're nowhere close to where we should be after X amount of time has passed. Let me see, where was this? Yeah, people think the freedom is the ability to do what they want when you want, but this is okay. So that was really all that I had for those notes. But yeah, I just wanted to bring that up really quickly.
Man, there's certain things that Yahweh has you to say, and I'm so glad that you say it, because of course with this snow on, people kind of expect to hear me say certain things, and half the time you're saying things that I really wanted to say. And so on point, I was looking at a young lady just the other day and thinking to myself, like, wow, I wonder if she understands that this lifestyle that she's chosen is has her looking like she's chosen that lifestyle.
Mhm.
Because here's the thing, what they don't tell you when you're sent on that thought-tastic journey is once you come down, the average guy, you might have some special cases out there where somebody gets quote unquote lucky, but typically once the thought-tastic journey is over, there's no guy that's interested because you've already been completely ran through and ran over. And actually, in talking about social media, I definitely want you to address this because I think it'll be more potent coming from you because I'm sure well, I already know how you responded to it, but I'm sure you've been approached. So a lot of women get dragged off, young women get dragged off, and older women get dragged off with the lure of trips. So you might have a guy offering exotic trips and, you know, meals at these fancy establishments. Now, going back to the path to marriage for a guy who's not a ball player, right? Because of course, if you happen to get a ball player and there's only a handful of them, so you're talking about millions of men and women and a handful of ball players, right? But I know of one young lady, she had the opportunity to deal with a ball player and he was dealing with her. And then she got bold and decided to start asking for direct payments because how that works is they're willing to drag you off to Fiji or whatever to wear you out. And you might think, oh, wow, I get to go to Fiji and then take you to a few restaurants. But again, at the end of the day, when it comes to having something tangible, having something to build on, yes, you have memories of being worn out, but that's all you got is memories. And sometimes oh my goodness. How do you going back to my question, how do you how do you how do you address those kind of now I know that you're in a successful relationship now, but when you were fully, single, how did you address those kind of inquiries from women?
Inquiries to like go places or
I mean, not just go places, because I'm sure, or maybe you didn't, maybe you never had people be bold enough to make demands like Ruth Chris or nothing.
Yeah, no. I really think it depends on how you meet people. I'm never really someone who I don't typically meet. If I meet you through social media, then I probably would have known you in person, and so, to some extent. So yeah, for me, I pretty much have to know you in person, meet you in person, something like that. So I've never had to deal with someone asking for like payments or me to support their lifestyle. I don't think I give that off at all anyway. So, but I mean, I think that does. I would say it speaks more to how some of the men lead, because they do feel like that's what a lot of women will go for. Uh, so yeah, I think with social media, that's a way that people do tend to stand out, which is another reason why it's harder today to kind of have a successful relationship, because or I'm kind of of the belief is, and I don't know how many people I feel like a lot of people wouldn't agree with this, but it's almost like once you get into a relationship, then you would kind of you would need to almost abandon social media these days, because I would say one, it's almost like you're still marketing yourself as single to an extent. I do know people use social media just to keep up with their friends, but in the grand scheme of things, it's just like anybody can come and find your social media. So if somebody finds you attractive, then they see you, they might shoot their shot. But two, I think it's just the amount of temptation that's there, and as well as the FOMO that you experience with social media, because it doesn't matter what you do. You could just go on vacation, and then you guys come back, and then she'll see, oh well, they went to vacation and then they skydive. So now you gotta, you're always one upping and competing, like and now people, I've never been someone to, well, I can't say never. I learned to stop posting certain things about relationships, because it just, one, it leads the expectations to the people who you're posting to. It's like that's a very that's something in
It's a trap.
yeah, it's like it's always a lose-lose situation, because now you're next time you have to go bigger and better in order to show your love is growing. You have to, so it's like you're now in like 30 different relationships just by posting to to social media, because this person might feel some type of way, or there's you never know what you're opening your relationship to when you start posting on social media, and hopefully you don't go viral, and now you have millions of people looking at just how you guys are feeling today. And if you're not happy, or if you got into a routine of, oh, I'm gonna send a special note, or write this person a special note on social media every day, and now one day you miss, now you got 30 people looking at you like, oh, what's going on? Now you got questions, and so I feel like it's almost like just having these eyes on you, everything that you do is just kind of smothering the potential for relationships to continue to grow in this day and age. And I just don't see it getting any better anytime soon, unless something significant happens, because we already don't have the tools to handle the marriages as it is, and just with things getting worse, and the loss of just privacy, it's looking spooky out here for the future.
There's so many different there's so many different directions to go, and I don't know if we have completed what we were trying to do with the idea of an apology, but
Got
what
it
I
started.
yeah, but what I do know is that um, anybody that watches this will have enough material to have a conversation with your significant other, with your family member, with your buddies, because we touched on a number of really important themes on this particular segment. And unfortunately, my time is up. I've got to hop, but um, my hope is that people will do just that. They will take what they heard here and use it as a trigger to have a conversation. If we can continue to have a conversation, the really big theme that you threw out there is this idea of arranged marriages. I would challenge people to look into it, and for some people, that might be the way to go. Or let's look at those cultures that are doing it successfully. What can we learn from them? That we definitely are not saying that one size fits all, because even in those cultures like India, not everybody goes the route of arranged. So we definitely are not saying that everybody doesn't choose that route, but a lot of people do.
Yeah.
And
especially,
go ahead.
Especially just from a family perspective. Like if two families are like, okay, we're raising our daughter to, know how to do this. Because I think it cut like, just when I was thinking it wasn't necessarily like, oh, at birth you're paired together or you know who you're marrying at birth. I think like, there can be, I think it kind of leads back to the concept of community. Like if people are growing up in a similar community, learning similar values, which we were also talking about today. Just in terms of like, I think there, if you're growing up in a community, you have a couple of boys in a class where they're learning how to deal with their anger in a proper way and how to channel some of that aggression, and women teaching them just how to deal with men, or in relationships in general. Like I think when I'm thinking of arranged marriage is more just like giving a little bit more structure to what we currently have, because I think those are things that a lot of people run into when they're trying to find out if they're going to be able to get married. Like, so I think a lot of people do get into relationships with the idea of marriage, but then they start to realize that there's so many things that they don't know just when dealing with someone else, like a whole another human being in a relationship that's supposed to last a lifetime. I think we just kind of need to set up some things that help people develop those skills.
Well, that sounds good, and I'm all for it. And that's part of the reason why why we're doing this. So again, thank you for all that you do to make these sessions possible, and we're going to come back together and figure out what's next. What's the next step. And we've got our eye on some people like you mentioned before, who we're going to begin to include in these conversations. And prayerfully, by the time we reach deep into the fall, we'll be looking at a whole nother level of momentum with what we've started. So I'm grateful.
All right. Yeah. So we'll end things there. Thank you everyone for joining us. Happy Juneteenth. Thank you, Frank, for joining me and continuing. We're staying consistent once again. And I think they're getting better and better every time the conversation is flowing. Still want to hear from the viewers. Leave a comment, let us know your thoughts on it. Is that a completely far-fetched idea? Do you think that has some potential to work, or any pieces of it? Because we're once again, we're not here talking as professionals. We're just having a conversation, and we're trying to bridge a gap between different generations, and we really want to have these conversations in bigger settings, and we want these conversations to travel and continue, and get everyone's thoughts on them so we can continue to improve the community. So thank you all. Like, comment, and subscribe, and we will see you next time.